So welcome everyone to Zoom Master Crash Course. The point of this is to give everyone a basic rundown of what's important in Zoom, what to look out for, as well as how to run a general Zoom meeting, and then finally how to elevate your Zoom meetings. My name is Nishant Chandrashekar. My two friends and co-workers, associates, Ashish Kuthagodu and Kari Lynn Morgan are both going to be helping me and helping every one of us here understand more about how we can elevate our Zoom experience. Ashish and I have been very active with the district in terms of Zoom since May. We were the Zoom gurus, or tech gurus as it's known in the district, one-on-one. And we've been there since the May conference, the annual conference in May. We've helped with the COTs, and Kari Lynn Morgan also jumped in at that time with the COTs, has helped with the TLIs, as well as the Fall Fusion contest that we had, a conference that we had recently as well. So now we realize that a lot of people can definitely benefit from this, and we want to help everyone understand. Now, since you have some information regarding myself, Kari Lynn, and Ashish, let's get started on the stuff you all came here for. So let me share my screen. Okay, where is this? So one of the important things about Zoom is safety first. What I generally do for all my meetings, when I schedule my meeting, is I make sure that registration is required. Why is this important? This is so that you know everyone who comes in. Everyone's required to register, so you have a tally count of who actually has the link. The attendees don't get the link unless they have registered. And there's different ways to deal with registration. You can either automatically allow anyone who's registered, or you can allow them based on who it is. Now this you can find in your settings once you've created the meeting. You always want to have registration required. You want to make sure that there's a passcode and that the waiting room is enabled. A couple things I personally like to do is make sure that my videos are on so I know when people are coming in. However, this you might not want to do, depending on your case. If this is going to be a one-way direction with your attendees, you can always choose to have your participants off and your host video on. This is just so that you don't have to remember to have your video on when you join the meeting. Now, a couple key things, very important things that you should make sure that you checkbox or don't checkbox. Do not allow participants to join anytime. What this does, it allows everyone to join before you. No go. Primary reason is because if someone joins before you, they'll be able to, you won't have any control over the meeting. You want to establish control of the meeting from the start and make sure it continues throughout the meeting, especially when you're making sure that you have good enough security, you're protecting your Zoom meeting, you don't have any people jumping in and out that you don't want them, Also, I mute participants upon entry. I've had so many meetings when people jump in and I hear cooking in the background, or there's dogs barking, or the person who joined is shouting to someone else across the room. This isn't going to help anyone, especially those of us who are in the meeting and someone else joins later. If someone else joins later and they have these background noises, it's going to interrupt the overall workshop or the flow. So make sure you mute participants upon entry. The rest of the stuff, it's really up to your discretion. If you want to record your meeting, you can. So once you save these, you'll have a meeting that's generally protected. Now, how can you do more? So there's this option called settings. This is my personal account. So whatever settings you usually see here will be generally what you use or you'll see for your own account. However, some accounts which have been given by the district, if you're using a district given account, such as the division accounts or the DD account, for those of us who do use them, if they're through a particular partnership with Zoom, you might have some limited settings. For example, let's say you're part of an organization or your company gives you a Zoom account. There might be settings you might not have access to. But this generally, if you have a personal setting, a personal account, these settings should be available. One thing to always make sure is that you enable waiting room. You do not want to have this unenabled. You don't want to have this enabled. I think that's the right word here. Primary reason is you, even if you know who's registered, you want to know who's coming in. If you want security to be high, you can always do this. If you don't have registration for an event, or the person who sets up the event doesn't have registration set up, this will really help you out. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be only enabled in the web settings of Zoom. It can also be enabled within the meeting, and I'll show you how to do that soon. In addition to having the waiting room turned on, you also want to make sure that this is disabled. Remember how I said you don't want participants to join before the host? If you make sure this is not enabled before you create your meetings, you don't have to recurringly enable this or unenable this. It'll just make things easier for you. And now, chat. One thing people tend to forget is chat. When you have a bunch of participants and you want them to focus on your presentation or your workshop, generally you want to make sure that the private chat is disabled. This is something you can set up or make a change in during the meeting. In regards to preventing participants from saving chat, if let's say you want to share a link, if this is checked, then the participants will not be able to save any copy paste or save any part of the chat. However, if this is unchecked, any of the public chat that's happening, the participants will be able to save. So watch out for that. And one thing you want to keep in mind, another thing you want to keep in mind is file transferring. If you don't have any intention to share files, turn this off. It's really not needed. That extra tension of whether someone will send a file, especially if you're holding a public workshop, that extra tension, the extra stress is not necessary. Try to minimize as many things as possible while still maintaining attendee satisfaction. That's the goal of the Zoom meeting, and that's what we try to follow. Since we don't really have any need to transfer files, and none of the attendees I've interacted with usually tend to share files, I have this turned off. Now, things that people generally forget. You want to allow the host to add co-hosts. In any meeting, you don't want to have only one host or one co-host. You want to have one host, one co-host, and one backup co-host. So if this is a regular Toastmasters meeting, the host will be responsible for overseeing everything, making sure that the co-hosts are given their permissions and given certain responsibilities. Each co-host should be responsible for certain aspects. For example, if someone, let's say, drops in, starts making noise, you can allocate that responsibility of kicking out people to co-host number 1. And co-host number 2 can be there for contingency's sake. There are times where internet goes down and the host drops off. At that time, the co-host can take over. Or if co-host 1 drops off, co-host 2 can take over. So generally with all the meetings I'm in, I make sure that as a host, I have 2 co-hosts. And if it's a regular Toastmasters meeting, the first co-host is usually another officer. And we know our responsibilities ahead of time. Now for screen sharing, if you generally do screen sharing, and it's an easy way to share information as well, you want to have this enabled. However, make sure that you have the host only enabled as well. The reason being is if you have all participants, as a host, if I'm speaking, let's say I'm the main speaker and I'm the host, as is the case, I don't want another participant to accidentally click the share button. This has happened at other club officer trainings that I've seen where we had the tech assistant immediately go and stop the sharing. To avoid that and to have a seamless experience, you want to make sure that the host is enabled. Now, if the participant wants to be able to share, then you can change that within the settings in meeting. For annotation, whiteboard, these are all extra. I have them turned off because I've never used them. We've never had the need. And last but not least, you want to have allow remove participants to rejoin. You don't want them to rejoin. If you're booting people, if you're kicking them out of the Zoom meeting, you don't want them to rejoin. So if you want to explore any of the other features, feel free to go through and explore them. But in terms of protection and security, those are the main ones. Now, let me talk about a couple of the in-meeting features that will be very important. So as you can see my screen here, there's a button on the bottom that says security. Let me know if you can't see this. Okay. So security is literally the main thing you need to know how to deal with. So allow participants to screen share, that's disabled. Allow participants to chat, yes, I want them to. Rename themselves, go ahead, unmute themselves. Right now it's disabled. Oh, so that wouldn't have worked. Allow them to start video, and this doesn't matter as I've turned off annotation. And lastly here, I know this is enabled or not enabled. You want to have this enabled during the meeting, unless, let's say, you don't allow participants to unmute themselves, you don't have, you have full security in terms of, or full control in terms of who can talk when, etc. You don't want to have that enabled. So make sure you have the waiting room enabled, and that will allow people, that will allow you to see who pops in and filter in exactly who you want in the meeting. Now, if you're sure that everyone's here, you can always lock the meeting. I've generally not locked the meeting. I just keep the waiting room enabled. So if someone surprising guest comes in and I know that they can benefit from this session, or it's someone that, oh yeah, they're kind of expected in this meeting and I totally forgot to invite them, I can always let them in. If I lock the meeting, then no one can come back in. And last but not least, I make sure that people cannot hide their profile photos. That's just a personal thing of mine. This is not only to know that I know who's here, but it's also to help other people have fun. Like, for example, like, you know that I know that Greg's here, I see his photo. That's better than seeing like if Ashish has his photo off. Or like, for example, Francoise, she doesn't have a photo. I just see her name. That extra picture is just a human touch I personally like. So you can definitely have that enabled. Now, how to kick people out? There's two ways to do this. So if you can see my screen here, let me actually find someone else. Declan, you're going to be my guinea pig for today. Apologies. So there's an option. There's two options. Either I can remove Declan or I can put him in the waiting room. I generally like to put in the waiting room unless I know that they're trying to disturb my workshop or the session like with intention. If they are doing with intention, I remove them. You don't have a right to be here because you're not respecting my time nor everyone else's time. It's not really benefiting anyone except you. Now, if I put them in the waiting room, Declan, I'm going to let you back in just 1 second. This pops up right here on the top right in the participants tab. I can message Declan if I want to, or admit him. So those are two ways you can control who's in your meeting, who you want to get rid of, etc. So overall, those are the main things. Oh, chatting. Yes, I did mention how you can do chatting. So one thing over here is there's 3 dots. As a host or a co-host, I believe you'll have this option. There are going to be 3 dots at the right side. When you click those 3 dots, the ellipses, you'll have an option as a co-host, say participant can chat with no one, host only, everyone publicly and directly. Now, directly means the private chatting. Everyone publicly means you can chat to everyone. Host only means only to co-hosts and hosts. If I enable host only, as a co-host or a host, I can see everyone. But as an attendee, if you try to now click the dropdown, you'll see myself, Ashish, and should see Kari Lynn. Let me make that quick change. So you should see only 3 options if you click on the dropdown. Now, if I say no one, if you try again, you won't be able to speak to anyone. You won't be able to send a message to anyone. So this is how I would control the chat based on when I think it's okay with people to talk, when or to ask questions, etc., and when I don't think it's a good idea. And there are times you don't want them to talk publicly. For example, let's say you're announcing awards, you can let them talk publicly. That's great. People can see the support and everything. But if you are trying to get a point across and you want to wait to a point before you field all the questions and answers, you can always turn that off so that no one can ask questions till then, so that there is not continuous interruption from notifications or anything else. This is up to the speaker and up to the presenter at that time. I generally have speaking directly turned off once the session starts so that everyone's concentrated on the content of the meeting. You don't want them distracted. This is majority of the stuff I wanted to cover for the protection and security aspect of Zoom. Now, please hold your questions till the end. We will have a section where we'll open it up for everyone to ask questions, and feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and we'll get to them if we have time at the end of the session. Now, let me hand over to Ashish. Ashish, I'll let you talk about how to run a Zoom meeting.
Hey guys, is my voice audible? Awesome. Some familiar faces here, so thank you so much for this opportunity. Nishant, thanks for going over all those. I've had some technical issues myself. I was not able to share my screen and have the Zoom window show up because that's what I want to do in today's meeting, right? So I hope I'm going to be able to do it now, and I have everything sorted. So I'm just going to share my screen, and let's see what happens. So yeah, so all you see is my Zoom window right now, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a few things, maybe repetitive for people who have already done this, but nevertheless, I'm not going to take more than 10 minutes of your time today. So I am going to go over some things that are useful, some things that you may already know, some things you may find fun, some things you may never use. But anyway, cool. Okay, so this is how your the control room would look like if you're looking for a meeting, and you have all your options here. You have the windows showing up on this side. There are a few very basic things that I wanted to show you, and one of this is, as Nishant mentioned, you may want to make sure your meeting is set up exactly like how you want to. Right, so all the settings are on the website as well as the settings here. So if you open up the settings from Zoom, you see all of these things, right? And in the general section, there is you view more settings, and if you click on that, it will take you to a web page where it will take you to a web page. Do you still see my web page right now? Okay, so this is the one that Nishant was showing you. Do note, and the reason I tell you this is there is a small icon V here, right next to each of these options that you can toggle. And do note that Zoom has a very good way of indicating which version of Zoom this option is available on. So let's say you want to use something for your meeting, for your next Toastmasters meeting, you want to use something, and you find it here in the options, like, hey, I want to try this out, this is fun. But before you try it out, make sure that this is one of the versions that you are currently on, and it's something that's recent enough for everyone to be on. If not, feel free to send an email to everyone saying, hey guys, we're trying out something, make sure you have the latest Zoom installed. So that's one thing I usually find very useful, always reminding people to install the latest version of Zoom. So that was what I wanted to mention here. Moving on to the next sections, right? So I'm going to go over a few things that are really useful here. Nishant went over most of these things in chat. So you see the chat here. As a co-host, I can chat to pretty much anyone here, which is a good way for me to interact with people and respond to their queries. Nishant went over these options. Fine. Now these are the important things here, right? So you see that there's a mute all and an unmute all button. So I can, if someone else is talking, click on the mute all button, and this is what it's going to show up. It's going to say, everyone will be muted. Is that okay with you? I'm going to say yes, and everyone apart from me is going to be muted. And the same thing with unmute all. If I say unmute all, it'll give everyone an option to unmute themselves. Right, so I'm going to go back to mute all. So make sure you actually make use of this in your meetings. We've had a lot of people, forget to mute themselves. The other thing is people have technical troubles when they're joining the meeting, right? They're either not able to listen to you via their audio or not able to talk to you via their microphone. So the settings for those are going to be right up here. You're going to see this, the microphone and the video options here, right? And right next to that, there's a small up arrow. And this tells you which microphone you're connected to. For majority of the people, it's just going to be one. But in the case that you have a laptop connected to a computer or another speaker or an extra microphone, you can select those options here. So you may want to suggest your participants to try around with these settings to get the right ones for them to get their audio and video going. The same thing for the video. I just have one webcam, so this is how it is. All right. Okay. So what else did I want to go over? I do have the power as actually right now I'm a co-host and Nishant is the host. The host has the power to make people co-hosts, and Nishant just mentioned this before, right? So Nishant, if you could make me a host for a while. Yep, so Nishant made me the host now. And you see that what happens when the host makes someone else the host is he is no longer the host of this meeting. So this is something that you need to keep in mind, right? Because if you are running a meeting and then someone says, hey, make me the host, I want to present something, or I want to take over for a minute, be sure to tell that person in advance that, hey, if I'm going to make you host, make me co-host immediately, because you will not have any powers after that if you just give away your host. And if that person gets busy with his presentation, you cannot control the meeting, right? So make sure when you're running the meeting, you're always a host or a co-host. If you're the host, if you want to hand it down to someone else, make sure that that person knows to make you a co-host back again, right? So now I'm going to just search for Nishant here, and I'm going to make him a co-host. So that's pretty much it. All right. So in most of my meetings, this is all I've had to do, right? So when initially Nishant and I were planning to conduct these meetings as web gurus or the Zoom gurus, right? We felt it overwhelming because we thought there will be a lot of people and there will be a lot of work for us. But all we've had to do is keep an eye out and go over a couple of these options, make sure everyone's muted, and make sure the people who want to present their screens have the co-host permissions. That's all we've had to do. Now, all of this may be overwhelming to begin with, but once you host your own meeting, it's going to be much easier and a lot simpler than you actually think. So, Nishant, are there any questions in the chat that, or are there any other things that you would want me to go over in my session right now?
Yeah, I think a couple of things we should definitely cover is switching between the gallery mode and back, spotlighting, and pinning.
Got it.
Both are very important for anyone in the like a regular session or when they're having a workshop.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for reminding that. Spotlighting is one thing that I want to go over right now. So if you look at my screen here, right, you see this cancel the spotlight video show up for me. This is because I am the host for this meeting and I can put anyone on the spotlight here, right? Zoom has a very brilliant feature. It's common with most video conferencing tools, but what it does is whose voice it recognizes as the dominant voice, it will put that person's face up as your video, right? And that can change. So if I don't have a spotlight and Nishant starts talking, it will be him who will show up here, but I'm still talking, right? So that's what's going to happen in your meeting. Someone else is going to be talking, but someone else is going to show up on the screen. To avoid that, what you would want to do is, if you know that a speaker is going to hold stage for the next few minutes, you may want to spotlight the speaker. So what you do is you go over to the speaker, you can search the speaker by name, or you can find someone here, Kari Lynn, for example, and say spotlight video. And everyone's going to see Kari Lynn right now. So this is what spotlighting does. So this is a way of overriding Zoom's built-in spotlight and make sure the spotlight's there on whom you want it to be as the Zoom master. So I'm going to cancel the spotlighting here. And okay, cool. So that was about spotlighting. Now, there are two things that you can do with your views, right? So on the very top, you have the speaker view and you have the gallery view. So the speaker view is so this is the button tells you where you want to go. The button doesn't describe what view you are in right now, right? So that's confusing. I totally get it. It's not describing what view you are in right now. It's telling you, I'll take you to speaker view. So if it's saying speaker view, and if you click on that, it will take you to a speaker view. And if it is in speaker view, you're going to click back on gallery view and go back. But honestly, I don't care. I just keep toggling this until I get what I want, right? So you don't have to worry about speaker view, gallery view. Just keep toggling this and you'll get what you want. That's what I do. Okay, so that's pretty much all I had. So I'm going to hand it over to Kari Lynn, who's going to, brighten up the session by telling you how you can make your Zoom meetings more entertaining. So over to you, Kari Lynn.
Thank you, Ashish. All right, I want to ask, who's overwhelmed? Raise your hand if this is like a lot. It's a lot. It's okay. We're presenting you guys with a lot of information, and it's okay. Zoom is one of these things where when you just get in there and click on things and move things around and practice and see what this button does and that button does, it makes a lot more sense. So I just want to acknowledge, like, this is a difficult format to learn Zoom in. It is really a hands-on type of platform. And so with that, I encourage you all, if you have your own personal Zoom account, like, go in, start your own meeting, just be the only person in there and click on buttons and see what happens. But until you do that, I'm going to tell you guys a few ways a few little things that you can do, that you can use in your meetings, in your Toastmasters meetings and in your business meetings, that spice things up a little bit. So I'm going to share my screen here, hopefully. Yes. And can you guys see my Zoom window? Maybe not. I didn't set it up right. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to invite you out because I've trained people in this before. But virtual backgrounds. Nishant, actually, can you share your screen and run this through as I'm talking about this? Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to use virtual backgrounds. So this is really great for your timer in your Zoom meetings. We've started doing this. And it's really a neat tool because it makes it so much easier to see the timer than when someone just in our last meeting, even though many of us do know how to use virtual backgrounds in my meeting. Someone the other day was like, okay, this is green. And then she'd go, okay, here's blue, but she'd hold it like back here so we can't see it. And it's really difficult. But when you use virtual backgrounds, yeah, I see some people have this. The way you do it is, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, and Nishant is going to show you on this, yes, the video icon and the little arrow to the right of it. If you click on that, there's an option to choose the virtual background. When you click on that, it will pop up a window for you. I don't even know what that says. And at first, you will only have maybe a few options available if you've never used this before. You'll have a few options of some pictures that Zoom has put in there. But so you'll need to add some virtual backgrounds. And you click on this little plus sign, and it will give you another option, add images. And then it will ask you where you want to load the images from. Now, what you have to have is you have to have the files from Toastmasters or some files that have the colors on them. And we can get those to you if you're interested in doing that. We can email them to you. And then you pick the file that you want, you click on it and click open, and then it will just add it to your virtual background menu. And then to change your virtual background, you go ahead and click on green. If it'll work. Yeah.
I think there's an update that I forgot to make, and hence why I'm asking you to download this. So,
well, it's okay. For the purposes of this, what will happen is when you click on that color, it will change your background. And I'll do it on mine. And so you can go green, maybe. Mine's gonna go. And then you can click to yellow, and you can click to red. Now, just for the purposes of Toastmasters, I really don't like to be in front of a virtual background myself. So if I am the timer in my Toastmasters meeting, I will just cover my camera, but you have to cover it the right way. There we go. Cover it the right way. Then what you will get is just a green screen. You guys can work on this. Again, I'm spending like 5 minutes telling you how to do this. So play with it. So that's virtual backgrounds. Again, we're gonna have a Q&A after this, and we can spend some time talking a little bit more. The other thing that I want to tell you is about polling, because we use this in our meetings. We present best speakers, best table topics, best evaluator, and turn my virtual background off. And so we use polling in our meetings in order to do this. So what you can do is set up a poll in your meeting by clicking on, there's a poll button. Now, if you don't have this set up beforehand, which you can do through the desktop version that Nishant and Ashish were showing you, when you click on this, it will go to your web, the web portal for doing this, and you will have to go into your settings, scroll down, sorry, you're right, Nishant. Go into meetings, the meeting that you have, that you want your poll on, and then you scroll all the way down to the bottom and you set up a poll. Now with this, you have to have the setting turned on to allow polls in your meeting, which I had all set up when I was going to share my, my background. You set up a poll, and what you can do then is ask people questions. And when you launch this poll as the host, people get to vote, and you can set it up anonymously. You can set it up to be on with everyone telling who's voting. And yeah, I'm looking at our time. I want to make sure we're good on time. The other one, see, I want to do one more. Meeting reactions.
Kari Lynn, before we go on,
Yeah.
let me just clarify what you guys saw on the screen. When you go over to your meeting, if you have a meeting, then you'll see the polling options on the bottom. And then you can click add, you can create a single choice, multiple choice, add all this. That's totally easy. You can add a question. And once you add, once you make sure you have a title, have a question, an answer, another one, question, answer, click save. You can always add another poll and so on. You can do this. However, to launch, like Kari Lynn mentioned, you want to go in your settings and search for polling and make sure that this is enabled. Otherwise, even if you have polls, you can't trigger them in the meeting. Back to you, Kari Lynn.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated here. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is reactions in your meeting. If you guys have seen, some people have been doing some hand claps and these are just little ways to spice up your meetings. When we're on Zoom, you know, some clubs will, people will actually audio clap, turn their audios on and clap. That can get a little disturbing. Some people do jazz hand waves. You can also use reactions, which is this button, another button down on the bottom. And you just click on it and you have an option. And when you click one of them, it shows up in your little window, thumbs up, clapping, smiley face, whatever. They don't have anything negative, which is interesting. You know, something like that. I suppose we try not to do that in Toastmasters, but so those are just some ways that you can spice up your meetings, show your participants, show your club members, and yeah, I think I'll stop there.
So
Do breakout rooms, but
yeah, so let me actually cover the breakout rooms, because as a co-host, Kari Lynn has a difficulty in showing you how to set it up, etc. So going to take back host privileges. So that's an option I can do as a host. As you see, Ashish is co-host again. And how you take back host privileges is if you're the one who started the meeting and the meeting is under your account, you go down, okay, for the sake of example, I'm going to make Ashish host again. You go down to the three buttons over here. Sorry. So when you're in the participants tab, one thing that might have been unclear in how this thing popped up on the right side is it's the participants tab. When you click on the participants tab at the bottom, you'll see a bunch of people. And at the bottom, as a host, as a person who started this, I can click reclaim host. I'm now back to host. If you're a co-host and you're the host and you were made the host, you won't see the button. So just an FYI there. So this is something that in case someone starts like dips in terms of like leaves a meeting, but they're still logged on, you hear the sound, etc., and you want to get back control and you're not the host, you can always click that. Now for breakout rooms. So a couple of things that if you don't see the reactions of the breakout rooms, they're in the settings. You want to make sure that they're enabled. So meeting reactions, in the settings, you can look for meeting reactions. And then you can make sure that you enable them, then you'll have your meeting reactions. You can also search for breakout rooms. If the breakout rooms are not enabled, you're not going to see it as an option. So make sure that's enabled. And you can allow hosts to assign participants to breakout rooms when scheduling. This is really efficient if you know it's only like 10, 15 people or even more, and you know for a fact that you'll have a breakout room. You can set everything up with the meeting itself when you set it up.
I just want to add something here. In this web page where you have a bunch of settings, it can be really overwhelming for people on what you changed and what you did not. Keep an eye on the rightmost column. Right, so if you scroll up, Nishant, to where you made the changes, just scroll up. Yes, so you see the modified and reset values. So Zoom is going to tell you and indicate to you that you modified something, and if you want to reset it, right? So for the other ones, it's not going to tell you anything. So if you want to see what you played around with, and if you don't like something, just keep an eye out on the right side columns.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you. So now setting up breakout rooms. As a host, only the host can create breakout rooms. So I'm sure that the responsibilities of host and co-host have been kind of unclear. The co-host can do everything the host can do except for very few things, which is the host can make someone co-host and withdraw co-host permissions. The host can create breakout rooms and trigger the breakout rooms. The co-host can only trigger the breakout rooms, travel between the breakout rooms. The host can create the polls and the co-host can trigger the polls. So any kind of creation process is usually, or a hierarchy and permission change is usually done by the host. So for breakout rooms, when I click the breakout room button on the bottom, the 2x2, a window is going to pop up and it'll ask how many breakout rooms I want. If I want 7 for, let's say, club officer training, I'll make 7. If I only want 1 because I want to branch out someone else to do some editing or testing for the video, I'll let them go there. Now I can either assign automatically, which just randomizes everything, or I can assign manually, which allows me to click. And the last one is let participants choose room. So I'm going to go over assign manually for the sake of today. Here with room 1, I have this window. I can click on assign, and I have the list of everyone here. If I click on certain people, you'll see their names appear here. And last thing I want to make sure is I check the options. Some of this is default. You want to make sure that your options are set how you want it. Do you want them to close after 56 minutes? No, I want them to close after 20 minutes. Do I want them to notify me? Yes, I want them to notify me so I know when the Zoom meetings are going to, the breakout rooms are going to close. Do I want a countdown after closing the breakout rooms? If I, as the host, close the breakout rooms, then I can give a 60-second timer for the people in the breakout rooms to leave, or after 60 seconds, they'll be automatically redirected back to the main room. Now, how it works is when you go to a breakout room, you'll leave the main room and then join back in the breakout room. When you leave the breakout room, you'll leave the meeting in a way, and then come back to the main room. So you're kind of shifted between rooms as if you're entering through a door and exiting and coming out of the door. So there will be a portion where I'll say, hold on, we're rejoining the main room. If I allow participants to choose room, let me do that. And you guys should see at the bottom a breakout room option once I open it up. And I want to allow participants to return to the main session at any time in case they have an issue, they want to contact the person in the main room. I always have that enabled. So, and the last one is automatically moving assigned participants. This really helps when we have sessions where we just want people to move over so we know who has issues. And so I have this, and especially this only works when you know who's going where. And if you haven't preset it in your schedule, then you can do it here. So I'm going to open it up. So now the rooms are open. If you have the latest version of Zoom, you're not on an iPad, you're not on a phone, you should see the option for breakout rooms at the bottom. If you click the breakout rooms option, you should see that there's one room and you should be able to shift back and forth. Now, let's say I want to broadcast to the thing. Everyone gets a message saying, please come back to the main room. And then I'm just going to close all the rooms. Now, since I've closed the room, everyone's going to have 60 seconds to come back. This is going to be very confusing for those who I randomly chose. Apologies.
You may have to go get them.
Okay. It's closing, so let me see. Oh, I just have to wait it out.
Yeah, Nishant, time check.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, I'll repeat what I said once the people came back, just so they don't miss the content, because I do feel bad about not letting them know. I should have sent Ashish and Kari Lynn. However, let's start with the Q&A. So there's a bunch of questions. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll allow people to unmute. Hold on, don't just unmute just yet. Let me feel the questions that were, okay, let's see. Okay, Megan, Munjin, Pat, and Ramona. Sorry guys, I'm very sorry for putting you in. I just had clicked, I forgot to unclick, and so everyone got moved. Long story short is if you are an attendee and we have the option of allowing participants to choose room, you should have an option on the bottom when we open the rooms to click breakout rooms and then select your room and then jump in. That's basically the main chunk of what we covered.
Hey, Nishant, yeah, so moving on to Q&As. One of the first Q&As, which is interesting for a lot of people here because they will be planning to, talk to other people and help them out with Zoom, is how can you share your Zoom window?
Okay. So this is a bit of, let me show you actually. This is something I found out and I felt like a genius when I did. Okay, so let's go over to the Zoom settings. So in your Zoom settings, the web settings, you'll go to settings and search for share screen sharing. Right above screen sharing is an option that says show Zoom window during screen share. Make sure that's enabled. Then once you're done, in your desktop client, so for me, it's like this. Go over to your icon, click on it, go to settings, click on it, and you'll see a new window that pops up. Go to screen share, and there's this option right here that says show my Zoom windows to other participants when I am screen sharing. Make sure that's enabled. Once that's done, if you're in a meeting when you do this, you'll have to leave the meeting, close it, sign back in, and come back in. And you want to make sure you test this before you actually use it on the day of your workshop. You've seen both success and failure cases today. So now let me go over, are there any other big questions that should tackle, or should I just go through the chat? Ashish, Kari Lynn?
No, that seems good to me.
Okay,
Good
so
chat.
I explained the difference between a host and a co-host. I hope that was clear.
So there's one question from Megan, right? So she's asking if you want to automatically assign or let people choose for the COTs.
Mm-hmm. For COTs, you want to allow them to choose. So that way, for those who can, they're able to figure it out themselves. And for those who cannot, we're able to help them.
So what usually what happened in the first COT where I was in charge of the breakout rooms was that we had around 90 people, right? And I can't hand sort 90 people into different breakout rooms. So I allowed them to choose rooms. And out of the 90 people, around almost 60 of them were able to successfully find the breakout room option and go into their respective rooms. So this is what will usually happen. For some reason, people may have logged in on a device that doesn't support breakout rooms, or they are on an older version of Zoom, and the host will have to intervene and put them in that respective room. So allowing people to choose will give you that flexibility and may make it a little easier. If it's a really critical event where you don't really want people to enter a secret room of sorts, in that case, you won't assign them manually.
So now going on to another question that we got was spotlighting. So spotlighting is very helpful when you have multiple speakers, and there's a recent Zoom feature update that really makes it awesome. So here, and also I'm very happy we don't have an odd counter today. Now, when I click on myself, I'm going to spotlight myself for everyone. So everyone who's looking at the screen should see me. Now there's an option to add a spotlight. So I go over to Kari Lynn's, add a spotlight. Now you can see myself and Kari Lynn. Go back to gallery view, I see everyone, and then I click on Ashish, add a spotlight. So when you have multiple speakers, you can do this. For the attendees, it will be like so. However, for recording, it won't record. It will only record the active speaker. The recording settings, that's something you should play around with in the settings yourself and get a feel for it, because even for us, we didn't understand until we actually played around with it. Now for timer, I would highly suggest that timer instead does a pin option. So for Pam, I'm just going to go over to hers and I'm going to find this pin option. Again, the 3 buttons has a lot of power, and especially because I'm a host, you'll see extra options. But as an attendee right now, you might not see the pin option because I've spotlighted people. If they're not spotlighted, you can click on pin. For me, now I only see Pam. And on the top left, I can click on remove pin. So if you have a timer for the meeting, and if you have a bunch of different speakers, then you want the speaker to just pin the timer. It makes it much more easier. If the speaker cannot see the pin option because someone else is spotlighted, just make them a co-host and they'll then be able to see the pin option. So that was one of the other questions that was asked. Now, we covered the feature about the breakout rooms, and let's see, I mentioned that. Yes, so Stanley mentioned a nice thing. If you have an automated timer setup, that's really nice. Like it really simplifies the job of the timer, just starts it, you're done. And on that note, if you are doing a virtual background, instead of doing an automated timer, sticky notes are going to save your back. So I have sticky notes and I just literally stick it over here. And the virtual background really just figures it out for itself. So if you have sticky notes, awesome. If you don't, you really should get one. They're great for organizing and all sorts of stuff. And for changing color with the background, same thing. Just click on virtual background. And whenever you need to change, just click the new one. For me, I can't show it because I have to download a package. But let's say I had yellow, I just go over and click red and it'll update to red. There might be a lag, and that's only if the window is, this window right here is somewhere else, if you have multiple monitors. Just a tidbit that I figured out. Megan made a good point. Yeah, if you have the red backgrounds is really catchy. So if the speaker didn't catch the timer, then you can always have multiple people turn it on, and definitely that is noticeable. That's a good suggestion, Megan. Thank you. I'll implement it for my club as well. Solzar put in the link for the timer cards. So if you don't have them, please do download them in the case you're ever a timer for an event or for your own club. So Ramona, you did ask about when you set up the virtual backgrounds, they go away, what do you do? I haven't really experienced any issue with the virtual background dropping off. However, I have figured out when the virtual background kind of fluctuates. So sometimes I'm more visible, sometimes the virtual background is more visible. And that's just depending on the distance and making sure that you're in the vicinity where the virtual background can detect you. If you're too far away, you won't be able to see. So for me, even if I'm this far back and I have a virtual background, you won't be able to see me. If I'm within about like 2-3 feet of the camera, then you'll be able to see me clearly. And even then, it might flicker and fluctuate over here. Now, in addition to virtual backgrounds, there's an awesome feature called video filters. So same way you do virtual background, you go to video filter, you choose video filter, and some people might have already figured this out. How do I not have this package? Oh, it is because I'm not using my personal account and I'm using the district account. So the personal account, I have everything downloaded. So you can actually go to video filters and choose whatever type you want. If anyone wants to play around, please do play around, have fun. For Halloween, this is how a lot of people did use the background.
Again, this is one of those things that's only available on the latest version of Zoom, right? So more reasons to get the latest version.
Yep. And if you are doing what I do, which is you're using a new account for your presentation, make sure that all your features that you're used to or will be using during the session are working. For me, I'm very comfortable using my own account. I've never had to show any of the extra features I did today because I never used them with this account. With my personal account, however, I went gung-ho. I had a virtual background, I had like a video filter, so I had cool glasses, had like a rainbow, everything.
Nishant, one other thing that can be useful and did come up in one of the questions is how do you know which version of Zoom you are on? Okay, so in the Windows, at least I use, I just click on About, and this will take me to the version that I have, right? So if you're on a, either side, if you're hosting a call or if you're on the other side of the call, someone else is hosting and you have something that's not working and someone asks you what version of Zoom you're on, you can just click the About button. And for me, it shows up right here when I right click on this guy and say About.
In a Mac, if you were in your Zoom screen and you have zoom.us up at top next to your Apple icon, to the right of your Apple icon, you just click About Zoom and the same thing pops up.
Awesome. So at this point, it is 7 o'clock. If anyone wants to drop off, thank you so much for coming into our session. One thing I want to make sure that everyone finds out.
There's one other question. can you set up the host and co-host in each breakout room? You may want to take this. That's the last question.
Good point. The breakout rooms only have co-hosts. They can only have co-hosts, and you can't assign co-hosts within a breakout room. Anyone who has to be a host, has to have permissions for host, etc. in a breakout room will have to be made co-host before they join the breakout room. So for COTs, we usually make every one of the trainers and the tech assistants and everyone who needs to have co-host permissions later on in the meeting for the actual breakout, we give them permissions right then and there when they join. So when they actually do get filtered out or like move to the new breakout rooms, they have the permissions. If you don't have the permission, you can always leave back to the main room, have the host make you a co-host, and then you can join back your session. Now, going back to the last point I wanted to make is we do have District 101, with the help of so many wonderful individuals, has put together these Zoom security best practices. This is something that's on the D101 page for security and everything, things that we think you should have, such as don't give your public Zoom link into social media, etc. Make sure that's all protected behind the registration option. Make sure that people are requesting for it before you give it. And every now and then, make sure you change your Zoom password for the meeting. So people are required to be in the know. If they don't know the password and they were shared the link, then they can at least reach out and you're also aware that someone else has the link. If there's a new event, open house, etc., set up a whole new link for it. Try not to have the same link as you do for the open houses and the ones that are open to the public as you do for your regular meeting or workshops. So if anyone has any questions at this point, we'd love to take them. Feel free to unmute.
I did see Carl's about changing the name in a tile. So I would say as a host or a co-host, you can change anybody's name. And the easiest way to do that is with your mouse, scroll over their tile, click on the 3 dots, and you'll have an option to do that. One of them is rename.
And we actually did that last night at a gift exchange, and then I was learning how it worked.
Yeah, but you have to be a host or a co-host in order to be able to do that. You can always rename yourself as a participant, but in order to change somebody else, you have to be a host or a co-host.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in the situation like your meeting last night, you know, everybody could have been a co-host, and I mean, I didn't quite hear how all of that ran.
Well,
but
we had one co-host who was really, really good, and he was fast. And as we moved gifts around, and as the gifts moved around,
yeah,
we changed people's name to the gift that they had, so we knew where the gifts were.
nice,
And the co-host did all that, so we didn't have to fiddle with it.
nice.
I have a question for Nishant about security. You just shared that when you do open house or regular meeting, don't share the same link. Oh, why is that?
Muted.
This has happened so many times this year. For example, when someone has a link for the open house and you use that same link for your regular meeting, that means that, let's say they share it with a friend. Hey, this is a meeting, and they're a person who can potentially disrupt your meeting. Then you've technically opened up your regular Toastmasters meeting to everyone, right? You want to make sure that you separate your events with different links so people are contacting you for the correct link. And you're making sure that these meetings are protected under another layer, which is the human touch. This will also make sure that any prospective Toastmasters are reaching out to you to find out more about the club and not just joining in all of a sudden. One of the things that we like to do in our meeting is recognize who is a guest. If someone has a link and just pops in and we don't realize that we're expecting a guest and we have like 30 members in the meeting, then we're not also going to see if there is a guest. So that's why I would have 2 different ones, is make sure that people are asking contacting the club for the link, And if they really want to join the Toastmasters meeting, they do have it. When you do follow with them, you can see how interested they are, etc. That's just the general way that we do our meetings for MCA Toastmasters is if we have an open house, separate link with registration so we know who came, we have their email, etc. And then we can follow up and say, hey, this is our regular meeting, please do come. And if you have any questions, reach out to the VPM. And if you're looking to join, then you can always also talk to the VPE once you're done with the procedures with the VPM, etc. I'm not VPM, I'm the secretary right now. So that's why I'm not sure about that. My next role is VPE. So I'll figure out things then. I hope that answers your question, Manju.
Yeah, thank you, Nishant.
Stanley?
Yeah, I wanted to also mention that share screen is not allowed for everyone, specifically for security reasons. If you have a Zoom bomber in the audience and you let them share screen, they can run havoc. Right. So that's why you do not want to allow everyone to share screen. You restrict that only to the host.
Yes, and if you know the person and you know, for example, that they're going to share a screen ahead of time, you can give them the co-host permission when they're going to share. And that's what I think is very smart to do with your speakers. If you know the speaker is going to share their screen for this session, you make sure that the VPE communicates that to the Zoom master of the meeting. If you have a recognized Zoom master for your meeting, and they give them the co-host permissions before they speak.
Yeah,
A quick question.
Just wanted to add one little thing, right? So all of this may actually look really overwhelming, but if you play around with these settings, it's nothing. You'll figure it out pretty quickly. So I would just suggest if you are feeling overwhelmed or if you think this is something that you can't do, you just have to try, and you will be able to handle a meeting on your own. It's going to be pretty straightforward once you put your mouse there and start clicking all those buttons away. Don't worry, nothing's going to go wrong.
Mike?
Crash course tonight. I have a few comments and a question. I noticed that some people have up to 49 people on their screen at once. I only get a 5x5 grid of 25 people. It took me a half an hour to figure out it's because my PC is not powerful enough. So I'm going to post in the chat the address, the link where you can see what requirements are for different things in Zoom. Also, you can't have virtual background if you have worse than my PC. I can't have a video background. Some people with a really powerful PC can have a video background, virtual background. So those are some cool features. And my question was, you said there was an option called disabling a participant from joining the meeting at any time. And you said you will lose control of the meeting if that happens. Does that mean you can't be host when you join?
I think there's two different things happening there. There's an option for a participant to not rejoin. That one, I make sure that the participant cannot rejoin and make sure that the option is set away that they cannot rejoin. That means that I've kicked them out of the meeting. Now, this option, all it does is if I finish this meeting and start another meeting, they can still join the next meeting, that next meeting. Just for the meeting that I kicked them out of, they won't be able to come back in. And as joining in terms of joining as a host, the host is the one that sets the co-host. So if you have other co-hosts, you join and you have the account that starts the meeting, then you'll automatically become the host, and but as a host, you'll set the other people as co-hosts. I'm not sure if I got that part of your question clearly, but that's my answer. So
just to add a couple of things, right? Actually, for everyone else, we're just going to hang back and take all questions. Feel free to hang out with us, but the session's officially done. So if you have no questions and if you have other things on your agenda, feel free to drop out. Thanks a lot for attending. But again, we're going to be here to take questions for a few minutes. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. So going back to the question, right, there are a couple of things that you can actually do. And I just want to share my screen to show that, right? The 5x5 grid actually caught my attention. And there's one thing I think we discussed that we had to go over in this meeting, but we forgot. So when you go over to this view, this gallery view here, I see a lot of people, and this is what Nishant sees too. But do keep in mind that some people don't have their videos, and it can be aesthetically unpleasing. So you can actually click on the 3 dots of anyone who doesn't have a video and say hide non-video participants. You see what this did? This just hid everyone who doesn't have a video. So I am talking to people with actual faces who have their videos on. So if you feel comfortable doing this, do this. And after this, right, how do you undo this? You have to go over at the top where it says total non-video participants and then say show non-video participants. That's all. So this does nothing except for the fact that hide everyone who doesn't have a video. So try this out too. It may look aesthetically pleasing when there are only like 5 people on video and everyone else doesn't have their videos on.
Hey, Ashish, I thought the non-video participants were a good-looking group, though. See, I wouldn't want to hide them.
Yep, it depends. Cool. So that was my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ashish. Stanley, you raised your hand?
Yeah, 2 points. First, you can also reduce clutter even more by selecting hide self view, and that just removes you from the gallery. You know what you look like, who cares, right? The second point is that a lot of the options, for example, not letting people back in after you booted them out, seem a little bit confusing. So a little bit of context here. This is again to prevent Zoom bombing. I was in a Toastmasters meeting, which was Zoom bombed by a team of 3 or 4 people. I don't know if you've ever been Zoom bombed. It is not a pleasant experience. What these people did was, as soon as they got out, they came back in, and because there was a team of 3 or 4 of them, and it was a joint meeting between 2 Toastmasters clubs, we didn't know who was legit and who was not. And so these people kept coming back in, and even after we booted them out, and long story short, we had to shut down the joint meeting. We had to reschedule it some other time. So a lot of these things are for preventing Zoom bombing. If you haven't been Zoom bombed, read up on it, because it's important to understand why these features are there. Zoom does not say Zoom bombing in their website because I guess it's a negative thing, but there are plenty of websites that discuss Zoom bombing. It's important for somebody who's running a big meeting to understand what Zoom bombing is and how to prevent it.
Thank you, Stanley. Yeah, that's one thing that you can always do within the meeting is, in case you didn't prepare for this or the person who organized it didn't prepare for it, you can enable the waiting room. So when you kick them out, they come back in the waiting room and you can laugh to your heart's content. But jokes aside, the waiting room is really going to help with filtering who wants in, who doesn't get in. So that's yeah. And
do you have to have someone dedicated to watch the waiting room? Because if you're the Toastmaster or your speaker, and I don't know how much time is involved to do the waiting room copy.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
North Valley makes a habit of assigning at least 2 people, a host and a co-host, exactly for that. If you're trying to run a meeting, it's very hard to keep an eye on the waiting room.
Okay, thank
and
you.
As a policy, North Valley doesn't let anybody in that we don't recognize. So if somebody has a weird name, we just don't let them in. We tell people you have to have a recognizable name in order to get in.
And one of the things that you can do, oh, 1 second, let me remove all the spotlights, apologies. One of the things you can always do in addition to that is you can message the people in the waiting room. For example, let's say you're expecting a 3rd person and they haven't shown up, but you see a weird name. You can message them saying, if you are expected to be in this meeting, just know that your name doesn't match what we have in records or what we were expecting. So please join back with the correct name, etc. I've had so many times in my own meeting where my co-Toastmaster signs in with their friend's account because they're either using their laptop or friends as in family member as well. They'll be using their husband's laptop, or they'll be at a different location using their friend's laptop because their laptop's dead, and we'll get someone we don't know. And hence the messaging really helps. Yeah. Does any, so I think the biggest thing you really need to understand from today's session is explore and interact. Kari Lynn really touched upon this one at the beginning of her section. And I think it's important that everyone takes the time, especially if you want to get comfortable with these different features and different options and settings. You should explore. Go to zoom.us, sign into your account. You can get a free account if you, I'm assuming that everyone here has an account. If you're coming in through the web version, then you can always make your account for free. The free account has 40 minutes worth of time. And if you want to get more than 40 minutes, you can always pay for the year long. And I think a full year is a good choice. And that's when you can do a lot more tinkering, stay on for a lot more, etc. Anyone else have any other questions or things that you think other people in the session should know about?
It was really well done, Nishant, Ashish, and Kari Lynn. Really well done.
Yeah, thank you very much. So
Thank you, Salazar. Thank you.
we know better what to focus on now, I think.
Thank you guys.
Much
There's one other
appreciated.
thing that I really wanted to mention in this forum. I think Kari Lynn can actually continue from where I leave on this topic, but Kari Lynn's a firm believer that people have to have hands-on experience to get comfortable with Zoom. And she has conducted a few sessions before with people who wanted that experience, right? So if you think anyone in your club can benefit by, having these micro sessions where they can play around in the Zoom session, we are open to listening, and we are open for your feedback. So please let us know, and we can do something about it. And
as the tech team, we're always looking to expand and open up the opportunity to try out new things. We have events throughout the whole year, the TLI, the great events that you're attending today. We have the COTs, we have the conferences. So if you know anyone, or you yourself want to get more experienced and want to get more comfortable, we have opportunities for you. Just reach out to us at tech@d101tm.org. And the email will go out to myself and Ashish, and then Kari Lynn soon.
Yeah. So the COTs are a great place to start. If you want to be a tech host, if you want to see how handling a session is, the COTs are a great place to start. It's almost no pressure, because it's fairly straightforward. Not a once in a year event kind of thing, and everyone's kind of very helpful. So if you're interested, reach out to us. If you know anyone who you think is going to be interested, reach out to us. It'll be really a good experience for whoever is interested.
This is Dorothy. Is it true that for certain iPad, we will not have many options available?
So for iPads and phones, generally it will have a lot less features than the desktop version will. And even with the desktop, there's two versions. There's a desktop web and there's a desktop client. The client is where I download Zoom.
I believe they stopped the web now. So it's mostly just I couldn't log into a couple of meetings on the web, just FYI. Yeah.
Okay. So I would really advise getting the desktop version. And then if the latest one doesn't work with your computer, then you can look into the internet to see if there's an older version. Generally, you want to see if you can have the latest one. With the phone, you can see multiple people, you can answer polls, you can see the active speaker and then control your speaking, but it's very limited, as you might not be able to see the breakout room option. You might not be able to, you can react, you might not be able to record. So for myself at least, I've had limited experience with the iPad version and the cell phone version, primarily because the desktop version has a lot of different features that I can take advantage of, especially to make the meeting seamless for everyone as well. So if you are having thoughts, yeah.
So my personal take on this is just a difference between using a mouse as opposed to your fingers. you can do a lot of things by touching your phone and getting things done there, but you can't do things as you would use a mouse on a traditional computer. So iPads and iPhones are really good for attending meetings, and I have attended meetings because I can move around my house, I can walk outside, listen in to meetings. But if I am hosting a meeting, I will have to jump in front of a computer. I have found it almost impossible to control people's chats and mute them all and see what options are available in an iPad version. So that's just my 2 cents.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. We're just going to stick around until everyone, if anyone has any other questions or comments. There's a lot of features in Zoom that we haven't touched upon today. Primarily, there's just way too many that even we don't know about. And this is just something of a learning process. For example, recording, we didn't touch upon because it was a lot of extra information that you might not use. You can generally record to your computer or to the cloud, and that's a whole different ball game in its own. And breakout rooms, we touched upon briefly just so people are aware of it. We hope you like this very conversational kind of session where I personally, at least, I know I like to be formal at times, but I'm more of a person who likes to treat the audience as a friend and just run through a couple of things as I'm chatting with you. So Ashish is very similar like that. Kari Lynn's very similar like that. So our session today was conversational.
Very good. Very good session. Thank you so
On the
much.
recording, as long as you're not doing this, you're good.
Nishant, I have a question.
Yes, Ramona.
Can you break out from a breakout room?
No, you cannot.
Okay.
So the breakout room has limited features. For example, you cannot run polls, and you cannot you cannot do the inception like breakout room. I think the features that you can use are reactions, share screen, and the basic function of muting and unmuting, etc.
Okay. Okay.
So it is limited, but it does do a pretty good job in terms of what options you have. Like it gives you the basic options.
But Ramona, just to add on to what Nishant said, you really don't need a breakout room option. You can work it out in advance and just move people to another room from the main room. So if people are in room A and you want certain people in room A to go to room B, right? You don't have to send them from room A. You can just ask them to leave the meeting and the host will send them to room B from the main room.
Okay.
That's what you would do.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I have another question on the, when you pin certain individuals or spotlighted, is that usually what they use sometimes when they're doing a panel discussion or something like that, where people can actually, quickly identify who is who instead of speakers among everybody else?
Yes, so that's how the whole ad spotlight is how they can do the webinar version for the general meeting. Now there's 2 types of Zoom meetings. One is Zoom meeting and Zoom webinar. We did not touch upon the webinar because we wouldn't have been able to finish this in a 2-hour session itself with that option as well. So with the webinar version though, you will be able to see just the panelists, and that's a total different, permissions. So we'll have the host, the co-host, the panelist, and then the attendee. The attendee will have very limited options for the webinar. That's why we prefer the Zoom. And the Zoom meeting, as you saw before, I'm able to spotlight myself for everyone. I'm able to spotlight Ashish by adding a spotlight, and then now with Kari Lynn, add a spotlight. So now you see all 3 of us, right?
Yes, that's great.
This
So are you doing that as the host?
Yes, as the host, I'm doing it. You can do this as the co-host as well.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. That looks good. Well, thank you for allowing me to come.
Definitely glad you can join and learn from this. This is definitely a lot of information too. So we will have this recording up on YouTube. I believe the district will be uploading this. So if you have any questions or doubts regarding the content we covered, you can always come back to the recording